Mm-hmm.
You may have heard of generational curses causing cancer. You have to look interdimensionally to understand cancer.
Do you think that quantum mechanics, quantum physics are going to play a major role in the curing of certain diseases? Because as we start investigating, like you do with holistic and spiritual healings, as working along with traditional Western medicine, do you think that the doors to the realm of curing, and I'm putting that in brackets, is going to increase?
Yes, about 10 years ago, I started on a quest with my radio show, Temple of Health, to interview cancer, holistic cancer doctors all over the world, as well as physicists. I interviewed Maku Kichu, who's one of the founders of the superstring theory.
Great guy.
Amit Goswami, who is a quantum physicist who has quite a good understanding of downward causation, which can be used to explain spontaneous remission. But, Rob, until we explain spontaneous remission, we do not understand cancer.
Wow.
As you know.
So somebody comes to you and they've been diagnosed by another doctor that they have cancer. They've heard of you, the great work that you do. What kind of treatment would they basically get? Or maybe there is no basic treatment when it comes to cancer. I would imagine it's very individualized, case per case. But are there any generalities you can share with us?
Yes, the first thing you have to determine is the patient's death date. We all have to die of something, and we all have a death date. Some people go out before their death date. They could commit suicide or get some disease that takes them out early. But if cancer is the way that you're going out, you just do palliative treatment rather than curative. The second thing we try to determine is if the patient really wants to get well. A lot of cancer patients have had a death wish at some time, usually after a very difficult period emotionally or some trauma they went through. And they actually tell me, because many of my patients are very spiritual, they know when it began because they understand when they started to create an exit plan. And then some of them change their mind, and of course, they want to change the energy.
Isn't that amazing? How do you establish a death date?
Clairvoyantly.
So once you establish the death date of the patient, if somebody just gives up and says, "Hey, you know what? I don't want to put up with this anymore. I've had it. I don't want to continue. You know, it doesn't. Whatever I do, this life of mine means nothing to anyone." How do you turn that around? How do you turn the determination of someone who doesn't want to get better?
Well, it's interesting. You may not be able to. I had a cancer patient who came to me with metastatic esophageal cancer and had absolutely no risk factors. And he kept telling his wife that he was going to die of this. Mm-hmm. And he went through chemotherapy. He did very well. He never had any complications, very little pain, one couple of days of pain, according to his wife. But he died. And I had a feeling he had died. I was actually on vacation in Lake Tahoe. And he appeared before me in spirit, and I said, "Oh, did you die?" And he said, "Yes, I did." And he said, "I need you to get a message to my wife." And I said, "Okay." And I said, "Was there anything else we could have done for you?" And he said, "No, my death was karmic." And I went back and gave the message to his wife, and his wife said, including that he had told me his death was karmic, and she said she had gone to a psychic shortly after he was diagnosed who said he would have 12 rounds of chemotherapy, he would do very well, but he would die of the disease because she had left him in a previous life, and he had vowed to leave her in this life.
So you actually cover the whole realm. You're just not a medical doctor, you also incorporate spiritual healing, holistic medicine, you go into quantum physics, you go into clairvoyance. Where do you find time for Dr. Susan Kolb?
Well, my time for myself is mostly meditation. We meditate here at the center in a group 3 or 4 times a week, and that's where I get my healing and bringing energy for me.
That's what I do is when I finish everything here and I go home and I sit upstairs in the living room, I just have the fish tank light on. And I just sit there, and as a child, I used to call it zoning out, but now I realize that what I'm doing is I'm meditating.
Right.
And I just feel...
You're bringing energy in from a higher source.
Exactly.
Right.
I can think clearer at that point. I should be dead beat by any stretch of the imagination, but I find that most of the inspiration that I get for any of the many projects that I'm involved with comes at this time.
It does.
Yeah. And if I go to sleep with a problem, when I wake up in the morning, I've got the answer. Isn't
it wonderful?
It is. It is. Quick question. My producer just asked me to ask you, is stress related, or is there a connection between stress and cancer?
Absolutely. These biological conflicts can be, the death of a child, the death of a spouse, a really nasty court case, whatever the stress is. There is usually an identifiable stress with most cancers within a year to 6 months prior to the cancer developing. Sometimes it's longer. But I'll give you an example. My bookkeeper came down with breast cancer, as did her mother and 3 of her sisters. And it all stemmed from the fact that their father, who was a physician, got depressed and killed himself and had no life insurance. So the family was left destitute because there were, 4 or 5 children, and the mother didn't work because she was taking care of the kids. And each of them got left breast cancer because, of course, it was a betrayal by somebody who was supposed to protect them.
Wow. It seems that cancer just sprouted into our lives going back, maybe 40 years ago. Prior to that, cancer was very rare, and then all of a sudden, you hear more and more and more and more. So this fast-paced life that we're living, the junk food that most people eat on a daily basis, the lack of exercise, they're killing themselves.
And look at all the radiation. We do a hair analysis looking for toxic elements, and many people have very high levels of uranium, especially with breast cancer.
Holy cow.
They were exposed to things that we shouldn't be exposed to. And, of course, I don't need to tell you about all the carcinogens that are in our food, water, and air supply.
That's so true. How about the microwave industry? The cell phones, the cell towers, the Wi-Fi.
All of that contributes, yeah. Did you hear the story when they were microwaving everybody at the embassy in Russia?
No.
The American embassy. Everybody got ill. They got cancer. They had appendicitis, and it was well known that the Russians were microwaving the people in the embassy.
Unreal.
That was actually on Jesse Ventura not too long ago.
Now there's
weapons.
There's a cool guy. He's a real cool guy.
Yeah. He's also a brave guy.
He certainly is.
Did you hear about that segment where Art Bell's brother, Fred Bell, was interviewed by Jesse Ventura
No, I
on
didn't.
frequency weapons, and then 2 days later he died of a heart attack? And one of the well-known ways frequency weapons kills people is by clotting off the coronaries.
Wow. Coincidence? I don't think so.
I don't know.
In the information that you were kind enough to send us, you talked about Morgellons, and we've done a series of shows on Morgellons, or the fiber disease, and we've had Dr. Hildegard Stenninger on the show. She is fantastic.
She is.
She's
a lovely lady.
She is. She truly is. In your opinion, Dr. Kolb, what is Morgellons?
Morgellons is similar to cancer. It is a fourth dimensional intrusion into the third dimension. And I'm happy to say that we are very, very successful now in curing Morgellons.
That is fantastic.
By closing off that portal. And I'm hoping to do, something similar with cancer. So certainly, once you understand the disease in that manner, you have to understand more than just the third dimension. Then we can actually look around for effective treatments that aren't so, dangerous. We used to treat with antibiotics, antifungals, antiparasitics, and that certainly made people better, but it didn't cure them. But I'm happy to say I just saw 2 patients back. One had about 1,000 lesions all over him, and the other had several hundred lesions, and both of them are clear except for tiny pinpoint 1 or 2 lesions each.
I remember maybe 3-4 years ago when the Morgellons movement was at its peak, and the pictures that they were sending all the members of the media of these lesions, of these fibers, and the stories that we heard were just horrific.
It's a terrible disease. It's also a fatiguing illness. These people are exhausted. They have neurological problems. It's not just a skin disease. It's made so that these people commit suicide or be totally worthless because all they can do is just sit in their room and suffer.
Unbelievable.
It is truly a spiritual illness, okay?
We've got to go to a commercial break quickly, but we've also talked to Dr. Hildegard Staninger about chemtrails. What is your take on chemtrails?
Well, I've interviewed I've interviewed Michael Murphy, who is the producer of What in the World Are They Spraying and Why in the World Are They Spraying? And so I think chemtrails are there for, the reasons on the Georgia Guidestones, which is to reduce the population.
If it was to reduce the population, wouldn't they use methods that couldn't be associated with the that weren't so obvious? Because you look up in the sky, you see the trails, you see the patterns. Wouldn't it be easier to put something in the water, put something in food instead of the?
Well, I think that they are putting they are using other routes, but I think that the chemtrails, the cover for the chemtrails was the global warming.
Yes.
So they had a reason to do that. And then these other things could be added later on if they wanted to. I think there was just options open with the chemtrails. I'm not privy to any information. I don't know why, I don't have any factual evidence about what's going on with the chemtrails. And Dr. Staninger certainly knows a lot more than I do. She's studied them and published on them.
I figured I'd ask you because you were a major in the Air Force and, great beyond. Anyway, stand by, Dr. Kolb. We have to take our final break. Exo Nation, Dr. Susan Kolb is our special guest this hour, and we've got to get the good doctor back and talk about many more subjects that she is so knowledgeable on and helping you. www.templeofhealth.ws and nakedtruthaboutbreastimplants.com. The good doctor and I will be back on the other side of this commercial break. Don't go away. With each new extreme weather event or terrorist act, it becomes increasingly obvious that we live in uncertain and challenging times. We all buy car insurance. Why not collapse and catastrophe insurance? Matthew Stein, an MIT-trained engineer and green builder, has written 2 outstanding books to help people prepare, plan for, and deal with everything from minor situations lasting a few days to full-on collapse. Matt's first book, When Technology Fails, is a manual for self-reliance, sustainable living, and surviving the long emergency. This massive book covers the gamut from first aid and emergency preparedness to alternative healing, renewable energy, primitive living skills, and 18th century technologies that could be critical to your comfort and survival in a long-lasting crisis. Matt's second book, When Disaster Strikes, is a comprehensive emergency preparedness handbook and survival guide. When Disaster Strikes is an essential item for every family's go bag. Both books are available at all usual sources. There's a wealth of totally free information posted at whentechfails.com, and author-signed copies may be purchased at mattstein.com. That's www.whentechfails.com and www.mattstein.com.